Everything you know about the Men in Black is wrong. Despite what the popular films may tell you, the Men in Black are a group of people that you never want to meet in real life. Their true loyalties are unknown, and their methods for silencing witnesses involve a little less neuralizing and a lot more threatening and intimidation. And according to some stories, they may not even be human. Men in Black sightings have been reported for almost as long as UFOs have been a part of the public consciousness. They claim to be from various arms of the government or military, depending on the location of the encounter. But every sighting provides eerily similar details. They usually travel in groups of 2 and are frequently seen exiting a black car. They wear matching black suits, often with sunglasses and fedoras, and are regularly described as looking foreign relative to the location of the sighting. They exhibit bizarre behaviors and speak with odd, unnatural speech patterns, but they all seem to share the same goal: to intimidate and silence witnesses of paranormal events. The first documented Men in Black encounter, as far as most researchers are concerned, occurred in June of 1947 in the Puget Sound region of Washington state. Harold Dahl was on a boat near Maury Island, collecting logs from the water with his son, Charles, and their dog. Suddenly, a pair of donut-shaped objects flew over them. Since Dahl had a camera handy, he was able to snap a picture of the crafts before one of them suddenly fell from the sky, crashing into the nearby island. The resulting explosion created a shower of debris, hitting the boat. Charles was injured, and unfortunately, the dog was killed. After returning to shore, Dahl developed his photos and showed them to his supervisor, who was skeptical at first, but changed his mind when he went to the site of the crash and saw the second craft still in the sky. The next day, a black Buick parked outside of Dahl's home, and a strange man in a black suit stepped out. Bizarrely, the man invited Dahl to join him at a local diner for breakfast. As they ate, the stranger issued Dahl with a warning: stop telling people about the crash you witnessed, or something very bad might happen to him. Though this first encounter could easily be written off as an overzealous government agent, later Men in Black sightings only get weirder from there. Many of the records of Men in Black encounters that we have today come courtesy of the late John Keel, a paranormal investigator most famous for his 1975 book, The Mothman Prophecies. While interviewing residents of Point Pleasant, West Virginia, on their experiences surrounding the Mothman, he found that many of them had been harassed by strange men in black suits. One of these witnesses was Mary Heyer, a journalist who had worked closely with Keel and covered the Mothman story for the local paper. According to her, she was working late one night in January 1967 when a stranger walked into her office. She described him as under 5 feet tall, though he was wearing slight platform shoes. He had a black bowl cut, thick glasses, and strange, hypnotic dark eyes. He started the conversation by asking directions to Walsh, another town in West Virginia, but as he spoke, he started to move closer towards Miss Heyer. Feeling threatened, she called one of the newspaper's managers in to speak to the man with her. The strange man left soon after, but not before taking a pin off Heyer's desk and running off with it. According to Heyer, he seemed obsessed with the pin, almost as if he'd never seen one before. Heyer would see the same man once more a few months later. He was wearing a khaki uniform, apparently trying to blend in, and seemed to be watching her from a street corner. As soon as he was noticed, a black car pulled up and he jumped in. Heyer would never see him again. One of the weirdest Men in Black stories comes from Owatonna, Minnesota in 1966. A woman named Mrs. Butler suffered a seizure after she and a friend spotted strange lights in the sky. She recovered as soon as the lights had flown away, but for days afterwards, both Mrs. Butler and her friend suffered persistent dizziness and migraines. 6 months following the event, Butler was visited by a man in a black suit who identified himself as Major Richard French. Like many Men in Black, the Major was described as being foreign, with a blank accent that sounded like it wasn't from any specific region. Major French entered Butler's home and interrogated her on her UFO experience. Midway through his questioning, however, he complained about having an upset stomach. Mrs. Butler, not wanting to be rude, offered him a bowl of Jell-O. The Major spent a long time staring at the Jell-O before discarding the spoon that Mrs. Butler had given him and awkwardly trying to drink the Jell-O out of the bowl. Another encounter that leans towards the surreal is that of Peter Rajovich, a folklorist who in 1987 was researching for an article he planned on writing about folk concepts and belief in other worlds. While he was reading UFO books in the library one afternoon, he was approached by a man in a black suit. The stranger asked what Rajovich was reading about, and just like in many of the other accounts, the man had a very slight accent that Rajovich couldn't place. Rajovich replied that it was a book on flying saucers, and the stranger then asked if he thought flying saucers were real, to which Rajovich replied that, as a folklorist, he didn't really have an interest in if they were real or not. He was merely interested in the stories. The stranger seemed greatly offended by this comment, shouting, "Flying saucers are the most important fact of the century, and you're not interested." He then said in a much gentler voice, "Go well in your purpose," and left Rajovich alone with his books, moving in a strangely fluid, mechanical fashion. When Rajovich tried to follow him, he found there was nobody else in the library. If you thought that the Men in Black were an exclusively American occurrence, consider the case of the Solway Firth Spaceman. This famous photograph features a little girl sitting in a field with a bunch of wildflowers in her hand, unaware of the strange figure standing behind her who appears to be dressed in an astronaut spacesuit. Jim Templeton took this photo of his daughter in 1964 on a day trip to Burgh Marsh in Cumbria, England. He claims to not have seen the astronaut while he was taking the photo, only noticing the figure when the photo was developed. Soon after going public with the strange picture, Templeton was visited by two men who claimed to be from the government. They identified themselves as number 9 and number 10, and they demanded to be taken to the site where the picture was taken. When he told them that he hadn't seen the spaceman at the time, however, the men became extremely angry and stormed off, never to be seen again. Much more recently, a visit from the Men in Black was caught on tape by security cameras at a hotel in Canada. The manager of the hotel, Shane Sovar, had experienced a UFO sighting in 2008 near Niagara Falls and had recently spoken to an investigative group known as the Aerial Phenomena Investigations Team. A few weeks later, two unidentified men were seen entering the hotel and began asking the staff about Sovar, who wasn't working that day. A terrified bellboy called Sovar to explain the situation, saying that two strange-looking men came in and started asking questions. He further described the incident and the two men, saying, "They said strange things that I didn't understand, and they were talking about governments and conspiracies, and none of it made any sense to me, but they were very, very scary. They had no facial hair, none. They had no eyebrows, no eyelashes, nothing. Their hair looked like they had a wig on, like it was attached to their hat, like it wasn't even real. And the scariest thing, their eyes were so big and so blue that they almost hypnotized me a little bit. These men, they didn't blink. Not once did I see them blink." It's a scary enough story on its own, but in April 2012, the Aerial Phenomena Investigations Team released a copy of the security tape from that day to the public. The video, which has since gone viral, clearly shows two men in identical black hats and trench coats walking through the front doors of the hotel. Possibly the most terrifying Men in Black encounter of all was reported by Dr. Herbert Hopkins of Maine in 1976. Hopkins had been consulting on a UFO case for a local investigation group, and one night, he got a call from someone claiming to be a fellow UFO researcher. The person on the phone asked if he could come to visit Hopkins and discuss their findings, and Hopkins said yes. Mere minutes later, there was a knock at the door. Hopkins opened it to find a pale man in a black suit who was completely bald and had no eyebrows. He seemed to be wearing lipstick, but it had smeared in places, and Hopkins could see that the man's lips were unnaturally pale underneath. As soon as the stranger entered, Hopkins' dog started barking. "There are 2 coins in your pocket," the stranger said. Hopkins had no idea how the man could have known that, but it was true. The stranger asked him to remove 1 coin, and he did, holding it in the palm of his hand. The man in black told him to watch closely, and the coin vanished right before Hopkins' eyes. The man then asked Hopkins if he was familiar with the name Barney Hill. Hopkins said yes. He knew that Betty and Barney Hill were 2 of the most famous alien abductees in history, though he said that he believed Barney had died some time ago. The strange man nodded and told Hopkins, "Barney Hill didn't have a heart, just like you no longer have a coin." He then gently suggested that Hopkins stop looking into UFOs, and left. Hopkins was so terrified of the experience that he burned all of the notes he'd made on UFOs. With all these sightings, one burning question remains on the minds of every paranormal investigator. What exactly are the Men in Black? One popular theory claims that they are just covert government agents or members of a secret alien tracking society who intentionally make themselves look frightening and inhuman and act in strange ways in order to make the people they intimidate question their sanity and appear less credible when describing their stories. Another theory posits that the Men in Black are aliens themselves, disguised as humans in order to try and cover up their own actions. There are those out there who even believe both of these theories might be true. One author and paranormal investigator who stated in an article, "My personal conclusion is that there are at least two things going on. There are the government-originated MIB, and there are the weirder MIB. Some can be traced back to official agencies of at least several governments. As for those stranger MIB, my personal view is that they are paranormal. Of course, much of this depends on how we define the paranormal. What do you think? Are the men in black just eccentric government agents, or are they something more out of this world? Let us know in the comments down below. And if ever you spot strange lights in the sky, if anyone asks, it's safer to say that you never saw a thing."